Well, thank you, LJ, for having me on, um, and the rest of the Navy, Marine Corps, Wounded Warrior Battalion, who's ever on. Like, I'm honored to be here. I'll give a little intro of who I am and who's up here going to be dancing in front of you on the screen. My name is Theresa Larson. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. And some of you I've met Kelly before. I've met Nelson, LJ, we go way back. Roger, it's the first time. Anyone else coming on will be probably new too. But I really enjoy, so I'm a physical therapist, but I don't do actually traditional physical therapy like in a hospital or in a clinic. I do have my own practice here in San Diego. However, we focus on working with those with permanent injuries, those who have been in combat, those who have been in a car accident, and who maybe lost a limb or suffered a traumatic brain injury, and are looking for that new normal, like ways to move in the new normal. And I found that it's been very powerful bringing individuals with these permanent injuries, veterans alike, civilians, into a functional fitness environment and treating them like normal people, because oftentimes the world doesn't do that. If you have a physical wound that you can see, it just, the human nature, people stare. With the invisible wounds, people don't know, let's say you speak with a stutter, or you get migraines, or maybe lightheaded all the time. Every brain injury is different. Every spinal cord injury is different. Every injury is really a little bit different. So whether you have an invisible wound that's neurological based or emotional based, or a physical wound, right? You have to now navigate the world a little bit differently. And so that's where I come in, and my team comes in, is helping people thrive in their new normal from a physical standpoint, which will in turn help their mental state. The other part of my practice, so I run a company called Movement RX, and we also work in the corp. So we bring programs and healthcare options to people at home in the remote environment, which is kind of perfect during this pandemic time when everyone was working from home. But for once, companies are now starting to take, look at the fact that, oh, now I have a ton of remote workers. What do I do about it? Like, how do I help these people? So 1 second here. I think that's fine. Okay. All good? So if anyone cannot hear me or see me, just say something. So anyway, working with those veterans and adaptive athletes who have experienced permanent wounds and are looking for a new normal and wanting to navigate and just get after it in life again, like that's what we do. That's what my team does, as well as meet people where they're at when they're working from home. And the two really go hand in hand. So, whether you have a permanent injury or not, like, and you're at home a lot, how do you work from a standing workstation? Like, what are some recovery techniques that you can do for your body? It might look a little different if you're in a wheelchair, but recovery is recovery. And it also might look a little bit different with different neurological injuries. However, again, those are things that we touch upon with the individuals we work with. So I get to work with my husband, which has been great. I'm also 8.5 months pregnant. So if I do go into labor today, right now, I'm just kidding. Don't worry, I'll be fine. I'll just do some pauses. You can laugh at my jokes too, by the way. I hope you all are. I can't hear you, but it always helps the presenter. So, but I've really actually, through this whole pandemic, and even before, I really love being able to support fellow veterans. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I was an officer in the Marine Corps, an engineer officer. So for all of those Marines on, hoorah, and Semper Fi, and then everyone else, thank you too for your service. But I love working with veterans, fellow veterans, And it's been really nice to actually use these platforms to present and still get material out there. It's different. It's not the same as being in person. Like Nelson was in one of our second adaptive courses that we ever taught. And, it's different than teaching virtually. However, there still is a component of like seeing someone talk and seeing their lips move and seeing their eyebrows move that really can still make an impact. So without further ado, I'd actually like, if you don't mind, before we get started, Kelly, well, LJ, you too. So even though you're the organizer and we know each other fairly well, LJ, Kelly, Nelson, and Roger, I'd like to know what you're looking to get out of today. And maybe you don't know the actual topic specifically of today, but I'd like to learn a little about what your goals are. So you can unmute yourself. LJ, you can go first.
I mean, I'll start, and as the quote organizer, I think it's a pleasure to have you as an option to invite you to come in and give us a presentation, partly because we'd already done the first part and I knew just the principles that you came out with, but having seen you speak in person and obviously through a couple different other training environments, I know that this comes from a great place. So the principles that you share about not only your experiences, but you have a great way of extrapolating those experiences to other people utilizing them, those same experiences without and applying it to their experiences. So I'm bought into your principles and curious and want to see how you take it. And while I left the service without any visible or invisible scars, through life, we all carry baggage. And so there's things in my life that I'm curious to take away the mind and body resiliency factors. So.
Awesome. Thanks, LJ. And Kelly, Nelson, or Roger, please share.
All right, Kelly. I'll go next. Hello?
Oh, Nelson. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So just piggyback a little bit with what LJ said. I already seen you speak in person. I've always followed some of the work you've done, connected with some of the people that have known you. So I have a lot of insight from many. So what I'm trying to get today is, as always, it's part of more of that mindfulness process of that new normal, which is the most difficult part that I'm really having in putting together to continue my life moving forward. Not only as an athlete, but as a father, as a fellow veteran, I wanted to continue to do something with it. Yet I continue to have that new normal as a big obstacle, because certain things don't work the same way as before, and it gets worse with the time goes. I adapt to something, and another injury happens, and it continues to get worse. So just working with that mindfulness and resiliency.
Got it. Thank you, Nelson, for sharing. Kelly or Roger?
It's Kelly. Hi. So again, it's so good, and I will echo what everybody else has said. I agree that everything you cover and the way you cover it, I remember from the last broadcast, is incredibly helpful. I think walking away from that, what I would love to see today is a little more, the concept of how stress and anxiety has such an effect on you physically and your physiology, and learning methods to sort of be more deliberate in how to manage that stress and anxiety, and how, again, like the title indicates, your mind and body work together, to impact your level of function, your functional status. So I just really I like walking away with concrete methods of how to do things. Yes.
Got it. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, so I kind of would echo Kelly in terms of what we've all been going through, the stress that we've all been under the last couple of months, and then also with so I have a chronic back injury and neck injury, so you know, sitting at the computer and things like that, you know, I've been getting tight and haven't been doing enough of the exercise and the things that I should be doing. So also, as Kelly was saying, really coming out with some more reminders of some of the concrete things that I can do, and that reminder of why I should do them, and how that's going to help me, you know, deal with stress, anxiety, pain, that kind of thing. And for me to much more internalize what you've been saying, since I have the time to really listen today, I can really get a whole lot more out of it than I personally did, you know, the first time or two around that you've been presenting. So I'm really looking forward to that part of it.
Good. Awesome. Well, glad to have you here too, Roger. Okay, so thank you everyone for sharing that, and I'm again honored to be back on. So just to give you a heads up on what yesterday was a review. It was basically the presentation I gave on the love principles: lead you first, oxygen advantage, vulnerability, and elasticity. So if you did miss that presentation, message LJ and he can probably send it to you. Like Nelson, if you didn't come to that one yesterday, I know Kelly was there on the first one. You're going to want to listen to that one at some point today. I think it ran about an hour. And the tomorrow is diving deeper actually into those principles, and we'll be going into different recovery techniques on, okay, so the oxygen, like what are some ways we can use, there's a step, like an actual protocol of how to ground yourself in moments of triggering moments, stressful moments, the use of oxygen, right? How to change your elasticity. What are some techniques that can actually change my neck alignment and my low back alignment and give me more of a power posture? We're going to be, so essentially each love principle, lead you first, oxygen, vulnerability, elasticity will be tackling in depth tomorrow too. And today is about, and actually, based on what your feedback was and your goals. So today we're going to be doing a little bit more physical stuff. So I want to teach you about movement and the benefits of movement and these different primal movements, and then principles of movement. So you have these primal movements that you do on a daily basis, right? And we all have injuries here, whether they're temporary, like I pulled a rotator cuff or strained a rotator cuff, and or they're permanent, right? Traumatic brain injury or chronic depression. So what we want to do is be able to like look at these primal movements, because we all need to do them, but how do you do them in a way that will be successful for whatever it is that you're dealing with? And then understanding with each movement. So for example, a squat, when you squat to a toilet, let's just use that as an example. That's a functional thing. Probably, I mean, I'm 8.5 months pregnant, so gosh, like I have no room in my bladder, my stomach, so I feel like I'm going to the bathroom all the time. TMI probably, but hey, real life. So being able to squat down, like what are the principles of movement that you have to do that movement, right? Because it's when injuries, these other injuries that can pop up, like Nelson was saying, like injuries seem to just keep popping up, that when you have, let's say, a poor movement pattern, and you do it over and over and over again, it's like, I don't know, like a rusty or a really tight door hinge, right? It starts to collect dust at the hinge. And that's kind of what happens when you have poor movement or a really tight joint and you keep moving it poorly over and over again. And we all have tight joints, and we all maybe have some hypermobile joints, meaning more loose joints, right? Depending on which body part we're talking about. It can cause problems when you move improperly. And there is actually a specific way to move. There are easy. There are actually 4 principles that we're going to be talking about today. And so it's like today is mostly physical. However, please understand that when you can apply these movement principles to the primal movements that you're going to learn about, it can really change the game for you. So if you're someone who's experiencing physical pain and or mental pain at the moment, right, just being able to go out and like move well, even move slowly, but move well, right, without pain or discomfort is a huge win, right? I know that pain and discomfort can really like take me out of the game. It can make me feel very unmotivated, and it can be disheartening, especially when I work really hard on being fit and healthy. And so I can understand the frustration that comes up from like constantly being injured, or the frustration that can come up from being stuck in this quarantine, right? Or this pandemic and feeling isolated and like you can't go anywhere. There's very little outlet for you now. You used to be able to socialize, go to the gym, and now you're not. And now maybe you can start going, but you're a little worried, and maybe you have a toddler at home or you don't. But there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. So today is mostly about giving you these principles. So when you go out and perform exercise or play with your kids or just hanging out at home working, right, you know how to hold yourself so that pain and discomfort doesn't start to affect you here. And the one thing about these movement principles that will help you is also that mindfulness piece. The more connected you are to your movement, so the more your mind is connected to your body, and we do that through breath, the better you will be able to course correct on your own. So many people, I'm a physical therapist, many people obviously come to me for, health advice and movement advice and injuries, and I love helping people. However, I want to teach people to course correct on their own and give them these tools to help them. So when they are squatting and it's very knee driven and they're wondering why their knees hurt, they can say, oh, you know what? I'm actually looking in the mirror. I'm not loading my hips. And we'll learn this in a little bit. I'm not loading my hips enough. No wonder why my knees hurt. Like I need to start loading my hips. Or here are some other drills I can do to practice what I need to do to be better at squatting, because squatting is a really important skill. I have to squat to a chair. I have to squat to pick up a kid. I have to squat to the toilet, right? I have to squat to pick up a kettlebell, those types of things. So I hope that all sounds good for you guys and ladies. So the first part of what I'm going to teach you is just the whys of the different primal movements. Okay, and if you can take notes on this, for some of you, it might be a complete review. And actually for LJ and Nelson, this is a bit of a shift from what I taught you all in the courses. I really, for a lot of what I taught, I went back to the basics of the primal movements of why, which I think is really important. So I'll teach you the whys of each primal movement, and then we'll go into those 4 principles that you can practice literally on a daily basis, starting with the breath. So first and foremost, let's talk about the squat. All right, so why is the squat so important? Well, first of all, the squat is so important because picking something up off the ground, you use your hips and your lower back, and even your arms if you're picking something up, right? So it's a very important movement. It's basically raising and lowering your center of mass. And I'm actually going to raise and lower my monitor right now. This is my husband's computer. I'm adapting here for you all. You see me in this like nice circle? Okay, hopefully you can see me okay. All right, so with a squat, you're raising and lowering your center of mass. So it's gonna look like standing tall and then going down, right? So that movement itself is very healthy for your hips. It's very healthy for your lower back. It's very healthy for your ankles. You know what I'm going to do is actually put you on the ground here. So I'm adapting here, everyone. to this position. So if you look at me, I'm going to move this away. So when I squat down, okay, my toes, and why doesn't everyone actually, while I'm talking about this, do it too? So I'm standing with my feet shoulder width apart and my feet forward, right? I want to be as biomechanically sound as possible. So again, if you can't hear me, make sure you unmute yourself and yell at me, but toes pointed forward, right? Stand up. And what I want you to do first is squeeze your butt and think about drawing your rib cage down. So my belly, I can't see my rib cage right now. I'm going to draw my belly down and roll my shoulder blades back. And the first thing to move are my hips here. And then I'm going to squat down and drive my knees out, right? That is a squat, right? And we'll go, I'm actually giving you little hints to the principles of movement here, but the squat, you can see how important this is, right? It's a position where I can get full range of motion in my hips. I get full range of motion in my ankles. It's really healthy for my spine. Actually hanging out down here is super healthy for my lower back. Because if you're always just going to parallel, right, your hips actually never get the full range of motion that they need to be healthy. Like we're designed to have at least 135 degrees of hip flexion, right? So if you're not getting that 135 degrees of hip flexion on a daily basis, right, your hips are going to start to get stiff. They're going to start to get painful. And what's going to happen is the above or below joints, which are, you know, if you think about the above joint of my hip is my lower back, the below joint of my hip is my knee, right? Those are going to start to be affected. Okay. And if anyone during this, because it's a small intimate group, if you have any questions about what I'm talking about, make sure you chime in, right? You can chime in right away. So being able to, there's a rule of thumb I actually like to say too is, you know, I am not actually doing a ton of heavy squatting at the moment. I'm already heavy right now. So squatting my body weight is enough right now in this phase of my life. That'll change here in a few months, but being able, no matter where I'm at, whether I'm pregnant or I'm not, right, or I have a traumatic brain injury, or I'm in a wheelchair, being able to hang out at the bottom of my squat like this for at least 10 minutes a day, give or take. Like you don't have to hang out for at least 10 minutes total, like 10 minutes all at once. It can be a minute here, a minute there. This is really, really healthy for your hips and ankles. And if you find that, okay, so I'm wearing Chucks here, but if you find that your toes start to turn out, right, or your heels start to swing in, my suggestion would be to hold on to a pole of some sort, like a door handle or a door jamb or a rig, something stable to allow you to sit back. And so the ankles won't become as much of an issue. Okay, so, and that actually for someone with a brain injury who has trouble with balance typically, that is a common impairment. That doesn't mean if you're on here and you have a brain injury that is your impairment, but it is a common one. So if you struggle with balance, hold on to something to help support you, but still take the time to go to the bottom of your squat on a daily basis. Okay, now moving on, and if there's any questions about the squat, make sure you ask. But the next primal movement, so there are 7, by the way, so that was 1 of 7. So squatting, super important, and we'll review it again here in a little bit with the principles. The second one is hinging, okay? Hinging looks like this. So I'm literally here, hinging over to pick up a box, right? This probably looks like the most familiar for a lot of you, okay? So I can't even see myself in this little circle, but hopefully you guys can see me. And the same thing with the squat is my feet are hip width apart, shoulder width apart actually. And it's a little bit different than the squat in the sense that my hips are just going back a little bit, right? I'm shutting the door with my hips, and I'm actually not bending my knees a ton. But you'll notice when my hips go back, my back stays straight. I pick something up or I put something down, and that is a hinge, right? And oftentimes we find the hinge is probably the most functional movement of all. I hinge a lot, right? I hinge over the sink to brush my teeth. I hinge over the sink to do dishes. I hinge over, I swing a kettlebell. I hinge over to pick up my really tall toddler. It's probably one of the most functional movements. And short side story, it is probably one of the hardest movements to teach, a lay person of movement. I went to Costa Rica, it was probably 5 years ago, and was working on a retreat with a veteran friend of mine. And it was a lot of yogi, really hardcore yogis. And I was teaching a functional fitness portion and teaching basically the deadlift hinge to a lot of yogis was probably one of the most challenging classes I've taught. More because we were deadlifting wood, but just teaching people how to keep their spine straight when they hinge over can be very hard. But the key with this movement is it's actually really stretching and strengthening your nervous system. So your nervous system, we've got our spine, right? I got my shirt on, the spine on my back, part of the spine. It's not the whole spine. It's clearly a small spine. But when we hinge, we're really putting a stretch on our central nervous system. So you might find after a workout doing things like deadlifts, kettlebell swings, or just a lot of hinging in one day, that you might feel really tired. And that's just because, when you think about it, if you're hinging over, right, and you're lifting something from here up, like the lever system of that object to where your spine is longer than if you were to lift it up from a squat. Okay, so the longer the lever, the harder your body has to work. The further away the object is you have to lift, the harder your body has to work. The hardest thing with the hinge is that people often are unaware, right? This is where the body-mind connection comes in, is when you hinge over, oftentimes they don't know where their hamstrings end. The end of their hamstring. So I'm hinging my hips back, I'm shutting the door, right? And then all of a sudden I feel a lot of tension in my hamstring. This is where I stop. Sometimes people just end up continuing to go, right? And this is what their hinge looks like. But now my whole back is rounded and unprotected. So the key is straight back. You want to have a straight back. And the only thing moving really is my hips. It's hip hinging. So I want everyone to just stand up where you are and kind of do 10, well, actually not kind of, do 10 hip hinges where you're just driving your hips back and coming back up. And really just think about, where do you feel tension in your hamstrings? What part of the movement? So I start to feel it here, right? And that's where I want to stop. And I don't actually want to duck dive my chest down. I just want to keep my chest neutral, right? Butt squeezed, ribs down. We'll review all this, but just think straight back, hinge at the hips, shut the door. Do that 10 times for me. Okay, thanks. So horizontal pushing. So we've got horizontal pushing and then vertical pushing. So horizontal pushing is when we're doing a push up like this with our arms, right? So we're doing something like this, okay? You can do horizontal pushing with your legs too, right? With like a hammer strength machine or something like that. But we're going to talk more about like things that you would do without any equipment, like a push up, or right, I like to push a prowler. So I'm pushing a sled this way, or I'm pushing someone away from me, or I'm doing an actual push up. So this one is the importance of it. So like the hips are like the shoulder, and I'm going to go into more depth in this in a little bit, but just like with squatting, it gets full range of motion of our shoulder when we're able to move our shoulder like this, right? We want to get full extension of our shoulder. We want to get full flexion of our shoulder, which is this way. And we want to get full extension of our shoulder, which is bringing our arm back. But what movements are going to allow us to do that? So push-ups will allow us to do that. pull-ups will allow us to do that, or any kind of variation of that. And what I'm going to do here is do one more adjustment. Okay, so the key to, just like when you squat, is that you load the bigger joint first. So what do you think the bigger joint of the upper body is? Between shoulder, elbow, wrist. What is the bigger joint? Someone chime in here. I'd like to hear from you. Should I put the Jeopardy song on? So the bigger joint is, so which one is it? The shoulder, the elbow, or the wrist?
Darryl Schaefer has joined us, and Darryl Schaefer says it's the shoulder.
Oh, welcome, Darryl. Awesome. Okay, so yes, it is the shoulder, precisely. So when you load into a push-up, right, you want to make sure that the shoulder is loading first and not the elbows. So we oftentimes see people doing push-ups this way or trying to push this way, but it actually puts our shoulder at a disadvantage. So we want to keep our elbows more in tight or at a 45-degree angle, driving our elbows back. But when we load in a push-up, right, it's coming from the shoulder versus just the elbows. So again, the key of a vertical or a horizontal push is to get full range of motion in that shoulder and keep it healthy. Because right when we're always stuck here, right, then this muscle can get tight and can actually limit our ability to extend, which then pulls tissue of our neck forward, right? And then we start to have problems up here. So getting that primal movement in, not necessarily on a daily basis, but a weekly basis is really important. Okay, so then we've got vertical pushing. So vertical pushing is bringing our arms over our head, right? So if everyone wants to go ahead and stand up and just test this real quick. So go ahead and squeeze the butt, draw the ribs down, belly down, right? Roll the shoulder blades back, tuck your chin, right? So you have pretty good alignment. And if you're kind of like, lady, I don't know what you're talking about here, sit up against the wall and do it. Have your back against the wall. So squeeze the butt, draw the rib cage down, tuck the chin, roll the shoulder blades back. And now bring your arms over your head, okay? So what we're looking for is, can the elbow be in line with the ear without any overextending of our lower back? Right, so that ability to get your arms vertical overhead is really important. Now, some of you might be here, right? Some of you might be here. Some of you might be here, right? That's really good. Just be mindful of what your back is doing. Or being able to get your arms all the way overhead is really important. If you are someone that works at a computer all day and you're starting to get tightness here, right, that's going to really limit that muscle, the pec, for example, or the lat, right, that attaches right where the pec is, pec major, right? There's a few muscles, teres major, pec major, and lat, that all attach to the front of the shoulder. If they're tight from sitting and working like this, or always being in a hunched position, right? We see this with spinal cord injury athletes who are in a wheelchair all day. It's really going to limit your ability to get your arm and elbow in line with your ear. So really important to be able to get here and work towards it. And if you can't, let's say you can't, and you get to here and you wonder why does the front of my shoulder always hurt? Or why does my back of my neck always ache? Well, you don't have enough support or range of motion in those areas. So if the front of your shoulder hurts, there's probably just really tight tissue there we want to take care of. And that we'll be covering that in tomorrow's session, actually. And then if your arm is overhead, right, you can't get your elbow in line with the ear, so the tightness of the pec, but also the neck, like if you have tightness here, it's not going to allow these muscles of the upper back to actually work effectively for you. So, and which means supporting the neck. The neck is, to be able to feel supported, this range of motion is actually really, really important to get. So tomorrow we'll be teaching some recovery techniques on how you can actually get into this position easier over time, because you can work on it, right? That go back to the love principle, elasticity. Like that's what we're actually covering today is the oxygen and elasticity. Those two things, like how are we changing our body? And we have to actually shift the way we stand, shift the way we move. So now just knowing that your body needs this, you can test yourself every day. How is my shoulder mobility? Is it gone from here to here to here to here? Over time, well, good. Right now you know that the ideal motion is that your elbow gets in line with your ear. All right, so now let's move on to the vertical pushing. So what we do, vertical pulling. So vertical pulling, same concept, right? We don't have to go over this too much, is pulling down like this. So when we pull down, right, we're using our lats. Being able to get that range of motion is super important. And when do we do a vertical pull? It's when we do pull-ups, pulling ourselves over a fence. If you like Spartan racing, pulling yourself over, one of those big walls. I did love Spartan racing before I got pregnant. But those are functional movements, right? Being able to get a glass from a tall shelf and bringing it down, that's a pulling motion. And it requires lats, it requires strong rotator cuff in the back. But if you're constantly forward like this, these muscles are going to get weak, these are going to get tight, and that range of motion will be limited. So we have squat, hinge, horizontal push, horizontal or vertical push, and then now we've got a horizontal pull, okay? So pulling this way. So we've got two more primal movements that we're discussing here. So when we horizontally pull, right, it's the same thing as pushing, just the opposite way. And getting that full range of motion is really important. So when we pull something versus pulling to here, we're being able to pull our elbow all the way back. So our hand is in line with our armpit. Now we're getting full range of motion in our arms. And even try that. Can you get full range of motion here without dumping forward or compensating somewhere else in your body? Right? That's really the ticket too, is can you do these movements, we call it as designed or prescribed body weight version without compensating somewhere else? Oftentimes you'll see people, you only get to here and then have to extend their lower back to get there, right? And the last primal movement is carrying, which besides hinging and squatting, so I would say it's the third most useful and most used primal movement. So carrying is essentially, literally that sounds exactly like it is. You're carrying an object. So imagine me carrying a suitcase, right? Carrying a purse or a bag, carrying a child, carrying waiter carry. I don't know who carries food up here like this anymore, but like this, right? This could be a waiter carry. So it's a movement that's typically done with one arm, sometimes with two. And when you are doing the movement, so when you are walking around, like you don't want to be overcompensating. So sometimes when people have a stronger side, you'll see sometimes it's going on. People have these like little compensation things happening, like side bending in their body. And or one arm might feel more shaky in this position. Definitely more shaky up here because the lever, right, is longer. So being able to kind of pull out, right, when we carry something on one side, let's say I have an object in my, I'll just hold my red cup. It's full of water, actually. So I hold my red cup. My left glute, this is not heavy at all, but my left glute is working. So when I take a step like this and I'm holding my red cup, my left glute is working and my right abdominal wall is working a little bit more because I have weight in my right hand. If I switch it to my left, take a step, now my right hip is working and my left abdominal wall is working more because I'm holding an object in my left hand. So if I have weakness on one side and I'm carrying something, a weight of significance, right, you might start to see this type of motion. and or you might see some hip drops going on, right? So if I'm dropping my hip I'm dropping my right hip down, right? That's showing me that I have a little bit of weakness on my left side. If I'm dropping my left hip down, it's showing me that I have some weakness on my right side. So with carrying, you can go, my suggestion would be kind of watch yourself walk in towards a mirror, a big mirror, and see if there's any kind of quirkiness to your behavior. Can you walk in a straight line? Does one foot turn out versus the other? Do you have some weird side bending going on? I mean, ideally you want to be standing tall, right? And you want to be able to walk without any extra compensation. The only thing that you really want to get a lot of actually is rotation. So when you walk, we don't want to get a lot of side bending. This is called frontal plane action. We will actually want to get a lot more rotation. So thoracic, we call it, and we want the rotation coming from our hips and our mid-back. So the hips and mid-back are the areas that we want to rotate. And if we're really stiff there, it can cause some problems. Also, tomorrow when you tune in, we'll be teaching some techniques to improve that stiff area of your mid-back, your thoracic spine, and your hips. So stay tuned for that. So as I walk, I'm getting some rotation. I want to make sure that I'm okay with this motion, right? Not this, but this. And the more thoracically mobile you are and your hips are mobile, the more you'll be able to get rotation. But sometimes you actually have to think about it, right? Versus walking really stiff, be able to like swing your arms and get that rotation. So very functional. Any questions about any of those 7 primal movements? So we have squat, we've got hinge, we've got push, we've got pull, and then we've got carry. So 7 different movements. Any questions?
Theresa, how do you address when you're teaching a deadlift, squat, kettlebell swing, those type of movements where you need to isolate the squat from the hinge or the hinge from the squat? Do you find that those tend to those 2 movements, is it easy to isolate them if you have a lower back injury or if you have a pulled hamstring, isolating those 2 movements in specific, dealing with injuries?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So here when I am taught these movements, they were body weight. Like I care more about you doing well with the body weight movements. So if someone has an injury, we're always going to go back to how does their basic squat look? How does their basic hinge look without any load? So when LJ brings up kettlebell swings or deadlifts, that more indicates there's load in the movement. And so showing you kind of what those look like. So if I'm going to deadlift, I'm going to pick a barbell up from the ground with a straight back, right? With the kettlebell swing, I'm just hinging and kind of popping the kettlebell up in front of me. They're both practicing that hinge primal movement, but I want to make sure that if someone is, whether they're experiencing injury or pain or not, can they actually keep a straight back? Can they actually throw their hips back first before even adding loads? That's the first thing. If they are experiencing pain with those movements in general, even without load, I'm going to want to little bit take a regression and have them practice like a portion of it. So when I get to LJ, I'm getting into primal the principles now. I'll show you some key ways that people can actually practice the pieces of those 7 primal movements where it can actually turn into kind of their training to be better at them. For example, like you're going to want people to, for example, how do you tell someone to keep a straight spine if they don't know how to? There's some tactile things that you can give them to do. How do you tell someone to, create torque in their hips and their shoulders? Well, there's some tactile things that you can give them to show them. So we'll go through that right now, LJ. But the key is when you're looking and working with an athlete is making sure again that they can get the foundational movements down correctly without load. And this is something we really stress in our course, because I mean, it's easy for me to want to jump to just like, give me some weight, let's do this. But if I'm actually struggling, I'm going through an injury, and I'm not loading my joints effectively with each movement, right? It's like the tight door hinge. It's just going to break down over time. And I don't want that. Like, I want to be able to do these things for a long time. Now, when it comes to a low back injury and just movements in general, I find that the squat is going to be better, or a horizontal push, like working on a push-up, right, to stabilize the spine, is going to be better than doing a hinge movement. Because again, when you hinge, right, your upper body, your spine is moving further away from your hips. Your spine is moving further away from your hips, and you're elongating the spine. There's a longer lever, versus when you squat, your center of mass is basically over top of your hips. So a hinge, you're going this way with your upper body and that way with your lower body, right? You're kind of going in opposite directions. And with a squat, you're staying over the hips. So it oftentimes is easier with someone with back pain to do a squat and practice that versus a hinge. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay, so let's keep moving forward. We're gonna do, so I'm gonna take about the next 20 minutes to go through these principles of movement, and then leave a little bit of time for questions, all right? So the first one is the breath. So with those 7 primal movements, we wanna tap into the breath. The breath really matters in how you stabilize your spine. All right, so again, LJ, this can go back to, one, are they doing the movement right? But are they getting these 4 principles in the movement itself? So squat requires you to breathe efficiently, right? It requires your spine to be neutral. So that's principle number 1 is breath. Principle number 2 is spine. Principle number 3 is extremity load, applying torque, rotational torque. And then principle number 4 is loading hips, shoulders first, bigger joint first. Breath, spine, torque, bigger joint. Those are the 4 principles. Each primal movement, squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, all need that, right? And so again, for those of you here looking for some mindfulness focus, and which is ingrained in each of the presentations over the 3 days, remember that the more focused you are on the task at hand, the happier you will be. There's actually some really good research that came out of the Harvard Business School, Harvard Medical School, about focus and happiness. So the key is to actually be able to do these movements and do them with focus, and like really think about your breath, really think about your spine, really think about the torque. And you'll find that the workouts, your movements might get slower, but they become more effective and you feel better. Okay, so with breath, let's just talk about this. So I want everyone to put your hand on your chest and then one hand on your belly. And what I want you to do is go ahead and close your eyes for a moment and take a breath in through your nose. Fill the bottom hand up first with air, and then the top hand. And then when you breathe out, just let it all out, okay? So you're gonna breathe in, fill the air up through your nose, so close your mouth if you can. Fill the belly up first, then the chest, and then let it go. And do that for a couple more sessions. Breathe in, nose to belly, to chest, and then breathe out. Do it again, so in through the nose, fill the belly first to the bottom hand, then the chest, and breathe out. Now let's start to add a little bit of tension to the breath. Okay, so that was for a little bit of relaxation. Now we're going to add in a 4-second inhale count. So hand on the chest, hand on the belly, go ahead and breathe in for 4 seconds, starting with the belly. Breathe in through the nose, fill up the belly, the mid-chest, the upper chest, and breathe out through your pursed lips this time. So go ahead and do like a shushing baby sound. And just think about doing it slowly, so for about 4 to 8 seconds. Breathe in again, through the nose, filling up the bottom hand first, then the top hand, and breathe out through your pursed lips, like you're shushing a baby. And breathe in through your nose, fill up the bottom hand first, then the top hand, and breathe out. Okay, so we've got some semblance of cadence there with breathing. So there's the inhalation that should last about 4 seconds, and then the exhalation for about 4 to 8 seconds. So if you think about the breath, right, if you need, we want to start to connect brain to body. But I just taught you a lot of body things, like what we do on a daily basis. But now to actually slow down our thinking and slow down our nervous system, the breath can really help that. And that technique of inhaling in through your nose, filling the bottom hand up, mid-chest, chest, and then out nice and slowly can help you start to connect even deeper with your movement. So when we perform a movement like a hinge or a squat, right, it's going to look more like, okay, I'm not going to slam my hands here, and I have my hands in front, but I'm going to breathe in through my nose, fill up my belly, fill my chest, and go about the movement, and then I'm going to breathe out on the way up. Okay, so that's kind of how you perform a squat, a mindful squat. Breathe in through your nose, belly, mid-chest, chest, hold that breath, go down, come up, breathe out. Okay, so that's in a nutshell kind of like what kind of breathing that you want to do when you perform a movement. The reason why we do it that way is because the diaphragm that sits underneath our rib cage and our pelvic floor that sits lower, right, can actually work to decompress the spine in that position, right? Allows the body to work efficiently, but then between sets, like you're actually going to recover faster because your breathing is more controlled, right? The faster your breathing is, the more out of control you're going to feel. And then the more taxed you're going to feel right away. So that's that. And I actually want to take you, LJ has done this test, but I want to take you all through the CO2 tolerance test really quick, which actually kind of tests your fitness and tests your fitness level to a degree, more on the breath side. It's how much are you able to tolerate CO2 in your body. We have to have CO2 in our body, by the way. We breathe in oxygen, we breathe out CO2. But this is more of like a test of, okay, when I breathe out, how slowly can I actually breathe out all of my air? So what I want you all to do is grab your cell phones, okay, and put it on the timer. LJ has done this one before, and so has Nelson. And what I want you to do is go ahead, sit down wherever you are and put your hands on your lap. And you're going to breathe in through your nose, right? Just do 3 normal breaths. Okay, so listen to the guidance first, and then you can do it. So 3 normal breaths, which is in through your nose, out through your mouth, or 3 breaths. And then on the 4th inhale, I want you to inhale as much air in as possible. So trying to fill up every last bit of lung space that you have. And then start your timer on the top of that 4th inhale. Start it, and then start to breathe out slowly for as long as possible, right? We're shooting for over a minute, ideally. So you're gonna breathe out for as long as possible. And then when you're done getting all the air out, and you can even hold your breath when the air is out, right? Only when you need breath in again do you stop your timer, okay? Now, rules are if you swallow, you feel panicked, you're scared at all, or lightheaded, stop the test, okay? So there's no reason for that. So 3 normal breaths, top of the 4th inhale, take a big inhale on the 4th breath, start the timer as you slowly start to breathe out, stop the timer at the bottom of the inhale when all the air is out and you need air back in. All right, so everyone go ahead and do this. And I want you to share with me, if you're open to it, your time that you get. So go ahead and if you're done, share your time. LJ, Kelly, Roger.
So I did it twice in there, and I'm right around 50 seconds.
Okay, good. Take
I have
note
no
of that.
idea if that's good, bad, or otherwise.
I'll once you all give me your time scores, I'll give you the standard for us. LJ or Kelly?
Yeah, you saw me doing it just now. I know mine's wicked short.
It's okay.
I didn't time it, to be honest. I was just trying to relax and elongate.
Okay. That's fine. You have the test protocol anyway, too, from the course, so you can test yourself and just see if it gradually improves. That's the key.
Yeah, I only hit like 42 seconds.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. So here's the way we score it, and this is based on a group of researchers I am friends with from Power Speed Endurance. They did a white paper on this test because I like that it's an objective breath test. There are other ones out there that I'm researching too, but between 0 and 39 seconds is really normal for a lot of people, but below average. Between 40 and 79 seconds is good, and then 80 and above is optimal. So the goal is to get to 80 and above. Now, clearly this test is going to be affected if you've just trained, right? So it's the best time to do it is in the morning when you haven't like exerted yourself, or it's going to change it. It's best if you're in a non-stimulated environment. It does test just your overall ability to expand your rib cage, your thoracic spine. People with poor posture, right? People with very poor posture typically just score in the 10s, 15s, 20s. That's the typical time that we typically see, like in the corporate, business population. Spinal cord injuries, obviously, and brain injuries are going to affect the time. The key that we want to see is just there's a trend of, is it gradually improving versus the spike? Like it's kind of like same thing as heart rate variability. We don't want to see spikes all the time. We want to see like a gradual improvement in the numbers. Okay, so that's a good example of like a breath test you can do just to see the fitter you are, technically also the more CO2 you can tolerate in your body, because your body generates so much CO2 when you're working out. It's not like I'm asking you to breath hold all the time here, but just know that this is a great test that you want to see the numbers gradually increase, but can really help you understand how stiff or restricted, or maybe that something's going on in your life that is causing your numbers to fluctuate a lot. Like it's a good objective measure to take a look at, like, okay, what's going on? Versus sometimes up here we can tell ourselves, yeah, I'm fine, rationalize it. But when you do the breath test, you can't hide from it. Okay, but the key is, again, you have to track it over time. It can't just be like once. You can do it once a week for sure, but I would suggest even once every other day for a while. Test yourself. Go to once a week, but track it consistently. So that was the first primal principle of movement. Second principle of movement is the spine. Okay, so we've discussed this quite a bit already, but your spine and how you move really matter. And I'll do something here real quick. Okay, so I'm going to take, if you have a broomstick or something like that, or a PVC pipe, grab that, because that's a really good cue. So what I'm looking for here is that the spine can stay straight when I hinge over or squat or do anything. So the back of my head hits the PVC pipe, the back of my shoulders, the back of my butt, right? And so when I hinge over, right, my spine is able to stay straight. When I hinge over, if I'm lifting my head up at all, right, the PVC pipe is going to fall to the side. It's going to lose its position on the 3 points of contact, which is my head, back of my shoulders, and my hips. So I want to make sure when I'm hinging over that that PVC pipe doesn't move. So go ahead and try hinging over, and can you keep that PVC pipe or broomstick in the same position? Now, when you hinge over, the limiting factor of how far you can go is usually hamstring and glute length, right? When I hinge over, it's coming from my hips. I'm shutting the door with my hips. So what's going to stop me is the end of my hamstrings. So the PVC pipe can be really helpful when I hinge my hips back, right? And I run out of room with my hamstrings. I can already feel my back starting to round if I want to keep going in the hinge, which if I'm lifting something heavy, I don't want to, right? I just want to go to where my hamstring length ends. And that's really important. The other thing about the spine is that being able to extend backwards is really important. So if you think of if you're on the ground and doing a press up, right? And then being able to go ahead and put your feet together, keep your legs straight, and then bend over and touch your toes. So I'm actually not going to be able to do that at the moment, but I'll spread my legs out and bend over and touch the ground without bending my knees, right? Can you do that without any extra discomfort or bending the knees or anything like that? So you should be able to extend your back, not loaded, and then bend over and touch your toes without bending your knees. Those are two really important motions that you should get. And if you can't, that's an indication of, oh man, I need to like work on this, because if you don't have adequate range of motion to be able to bend over and touch your toes, that means that there's extra pulling on the lower back and the discs that support the lower back. It's extra pulling on the hips, which again can lead to why you might wonder, like, why are my hips bothering me? Or why is my neck bothering me? Or why does my lower back bother me? Oh, I can't touch my toes. And when I extend, it actually feels pretty good. Or maybe it doesn't feel good. So being able to know that, okay, when I bring my arms over my head or even put my hands on my hips, I should be able to bend backwards and look up towards the sky, right, without any pain. And I should be able to bend over and touch my toes, not bending my knees. And if I can't do that, that's a movement dysfunction that I need to work on to be able to do that. And yes, doing things like hinging and deadlifting and RDLs and kettlebell swings and squats can help improve range of motion. It for sure can. But you have to know your limits, right? If your hamstrings end here in your hinge, they end here. If you start to go further, what's going to happen to your lower back? And under load, that's not so awesome. So that's where, again, connection of mind and body is super, super important. And now when you add the breath into it, right, so I'm breathing in through my nose, into my belly, chest, holding my breath, hinging my hips back till I feel my hamstrings tighten and stretch, and then breathe out on the way up. Okay, so the next principle, so that's breath and spine. The next principle is called torque. This is for stability. And this might be a really new one for a lot of you. So let's just talk about the arms. So the hips, and shoulders are actually, in the world of biomechanics and functional fitness, they're about the same joint. They move similarly under load for stability purposes. And stability means control of the movement. So if I am moving, so if I want to take my arm over my head, right? I don't want to just throw my arm up, but I actually want to create a rotational force and then take my arm overhead, which will protect my shoulder. Okay, if I'm squatting down, right, you can see my hips kind of, I'm wearing black pants. If I'm squatting down, I don't want just to drive my knees forward or in. I actually want to drive my knees out. I'm creating a rotation in my hips that creates stability in my hips. So if you take your hand, right, and put it inside your shirt, I don't have much room in my shirt, and you twist the shirt, right, you're creating tightness, stability there. That's your joint capsule, right? So you put your fist in the shirt and you twist it, right? That's creating some stability, tightening the shirt. Same thing here, tightening means stability. So we don't want a loose joint when we're going overhead or we're squatting down. So when I bring my arms up or bend my knees, right? This is anything in front of my body is considered flexion, we call it. I want to create external rotation stability. So I want to rotate my arm. I want to rotate my knees out. So that will allow me, it's kind of like screwing a light bulb, that will allow my shoulder to be stable, and it will take my shoulder from this position to this position, more in alignment. This position to this position. So now when I go overhead, I'm more aligned in my shoulder blade, less likely to pinch. And then with my knees, right, going forward is I'm only going to feel it in my quads versus driving out, right? I'm going to feel it in my hips. So that is kind of the down low on stability, okay? It might be for those of you that aren't used to the language of biomechanics, that might be challenging, but just know that, right, you don't want to just squat down with it, just not really thinking about it, right? I think you probably got that at this point. You want to think about loading, like, and driving those knees out when you squat down, because that will create, that rotation in the hips will create stability. I take my arm overhead, that will create stability in the arm. Now, the opposite is true for when I go back. So when I extend or bring my leg or my arm behind me, I actually want to create a little bit of internal rotation, which is this way versus this way, right? So I'm bringing my arms straight behind me, right? And when I run, so think about running, right? It would be weird if you ran with your toes pointed out like this and your hips kind of like, toes pointed out and hips kind of opened up. Like that back leg, if I were to bring, see if I can bring this lower. Bear with me for a sec. All right, so that back leg, right, is going straight back. So I'm going straight back versus out like this, right? This is, I'm getting extension and internal rotation. So when I run, I want my toes to be facing forward. My back leg is in, my front leg is in flexion. My back leg is in an extension. I'm stable here versus like this. Same with the arms. When I bring my arms back, I don't want to be flailing out here or like this, right? I just want my elbows to be back. My shoulders are getting internal rotation, and I can do the movement with stability in the shoulders. So that might be a bit of an advanced concept for those of you that aren't used to biomechanics, but we're recording this so you can go back and watch. And the last principle, and just quick by the way, with the stability and some of the concepts I think about, if you want to apply it to fitness, is if I'm on the pull-up bar, I might think break the bar is a great cue. Break the bar, that creates the stability. Drive the knees out are great stability cues. Things like that. If I'm holding a barbell, PVC pipe, right, break the bar. I'm trying to break it in half. That's a great stability cue, and it creates torque in the joints that need it. And then the last concept is core to extremity movement. We're almost done here. So when I load, we've already gone over this a bunch with each of the different primal movements I taught, but you want to load the bigger joint first. Like in the push-up, right, instead of doing this, right, we load, you think about a chaturanga in yoga, right? We're here, so we're at the top. We load our shoulders first. We go down, and then we press back up. So we always load the bigger joint first, which is the shoulder. With the hip, it's the same thing, right? I'm not going to squat down with my knees forward. I'm going to load my hips first and then drive my knees out. So that bigger joint actually takes the larger amount of force, ground reaction force, which is what you want, right? You don't want that ground reaction force going into the elbow or the knees, right? That's just going to cause those problems in those areas, which some of you might already have. So remember, load the bigger joints first. And so those are the 4 like key principles, like down and dirty. Breath, right? We spend the most time there because it's the most important for brain-body connection. Spine, most important part of our body to protect. So that's why we slow down the movement and learn to move there well. Core to extremity, stability, right? What do we need to do with our extremity joints to also create stability so we don't get impingements and patellar tendonitis and plantar fasciitis, things like that. And then and any other orthopedic injury that can pop up even with permanent injuries, right? And then the core to extremity. So you apply all 4 of those principles to each of those primal movements: squat, hinge, push, pull, and carry. And you'll find that you might be thinking, lady, I just want to like fitness, not think about it. But think about this. If motion is motion is lotion. So it's the one area, it's the lowest barrier of entry of medicine for our body. And if I'm thinking that most of you want to do this for a really long time versus like just through your 30s or 40s or 50s. If you want to live as long as my grandma, who's 105, who still dances, right? Like we have to think about the way we move and moving well so that the repetitions that we're getting are good for our body versus breaking it down all the time. If I'm constantly rounding my back when I go out and play with my son, or I'm never actually testing myself, that's going to be a problem over time. So at least this is a start for you. And when you do fitness, believe me, if you actually start to slow down and think about movement and trying to get full range of motion with your movements and really practicing, you'll still get a sweat on. It's still going to be hard. But then you can start to, it's like anything else, building a skill. You practice and practice and practice, and then you start to add load when you get the movement pattern down right. Any questions now?
So I have a question. It's going to be great to go back and review this video and sort of go through some of these again. But do you have some sort of written material, or could you provide like a sort of a list of those things that I could sort of refer to? Because I can't watch the video all the time, but I'd like to try to work on these movements regularly. So having that list of some of these different basic movements and the thought process is sort of a visual reminder for myself and, you know, maybe somebody who has a TBI, something like that,
Yes.
Something that we can refer back to.
I have, I can send you the part of the manual from the course. And then if you go on to, so what I would suggest, this is the best way for motor learning too, is if you go on, so I'll send you the part in the manual about this section. So the primal movements plus all of the principles of movement. And then you go onto the Movement RX website and you look up blog videos. You're going to see these principles of movement carried out in some of the videos too. It's a great, like, what the best way to learn would be, like, you learn, you apply these movements to yourself and you read through it, and then you look at a source that's actually doing it right, and then you start to like maybe look at other sources on the internet, right? Like look at, you know, Jillian Michaels doing a squat. Is it relatable to what we're doing at Movement RX or what you learned? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know how she squats. Does that make sense, Roger?
No, that totally makes sense because, you know, I'm trying to do these things here at home, and having that visual of what other people are doing And then obviously, doing it in front of a mirror or recording myself would be helpful so that I can see, am I rounding my back? Am I keeping my back straight? Am I mirroring the motions that other people are doing?
So the other thing that you can do, and this session isn't meant to be a plug for my business, but it's with Movement RX. We have a website. The new one is launching here pretty soon. We've got a bunch of different programs for people. So the point is, like, all of the programs that we've built have been built off of these principles. So, like, let's say you are experiencing shoulder issues, or you have low back issues, or you just want to learn some testing techniques and some recovery techniques. Well, we have options for that. And they're really cost effective, like really cost effective. So, like, if you wanted a low back, we have a low back fix program. We have a down regulation recovery program. And it's actually, we've been working on it for the last 9 months since I've been pregnant. It's been in the works for a while. So the blogs that we have are all great to look at, Roger. But let's say you wanted a little bit more guidance on a program that follow these principles for, say, you have a traumatic brain injury, and you just have issues with dizziness and you want to help your lower back. Okay, you have 20 minutes a day. We can help you with that. So I'll send you guys the website and you can check it out in your own convenience.
That sounds great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Theresa, I'll give you a challenging question or just a thought-provoking question as far as movement patterns in relation, because I love how you brought up, like, hey, we all just want to, like, apply it to fitness. So one of the things in my experience with coaching is you can teach the movement patterns, and for some people the movement patterns can be more difficult when you take away the resistance. Mm-hmm. Especially, not to get into like the powerlifting or Olympic lifts, but is there a correlation that you found where adding resistance makes some movement patterns easier or more efficient or easier to see done correctly?
Yeah.
And so if we have an injury and it hurts just to do a basic squat without resistance, how do we overcome that to add resistance? Or should we do that?
That's a good question. So there's two parts to that. If you have the best way, no matter what, if you don't know what's going on, if you don't know the extent of the person's injury, like traumatic brain injury maybe, or like what is going on, you want to decrease stability requirements first. So definitely adding load isn't the answer right away, but there is one instance where it is, but I'll go into that in a second. So but adding load for the general pop, no. Like general pop meaning general, even military. Like you want to decrease stability requirements. So instead of doing a squat, if it's hurting them and they can't get the movement pattern right, there's some probably motor control issue going on in their body. Motor control meaning like they're just not fully aware where their body is in space. So you might be saying, you're driving your knees out and your hips back, and they think they're doing it, but they're not, right? There's that whole perception of the person doing it and then what you see. So if they're in pain, like you take them to a lesser stability requirement. So it could be on their back, doing glute bridges, right? No load there, and see how they do. And most likely it's going to take a lot of the discomfort away that they feel on their knees or their lower back, two common areas that maybe feel with the squat. Or get them into a side position, doing a leg lift or something where they're getting, they're working their glutes, but it's a different plane of motion and they don't have to worry about, like, their spine basically stays in one place the whole time. So those are, you want to think like, okay, first, how do I decrease stability requirements? And the way I do it is I go from standing to tall kneeling, to maybe half kneeling, to laying on my back, sideline, and then facing down, if it makes sense. if that makes sense. So there's like a way I decrease the need for the body to work so hard. And in those different positions, so if I'm in a tall kneeling position, so imagine I'm just on my knees right now, and this feels good, doing a hinge, well then give them a kettlebell to hold on to. Okay, so practice the hinge there with load. But when you get back up, can they do it without the load, the hinge? And then when they can do it well without the load, without pain, then you bring the load on. Now, I don't want everyone to be freaked out about pain all the time. Pain is just a way to identify there's a threat. So sometimes if people are in chronic pain, they're going to be confused as to what's good for them or what's not. So just consider that a small amount of discomfort might be a small amount of pain for some people, especially people who've had pain for years and years, might be present. But you never want that pain to be above average what it normally is. So let's say someone's pain threshold is like, well, it's a 3 normally. You really don't want it to go above a 2, right, when they're working out. And that's, again, for people who have had pain for years and years. But you can never go wrong with decreasing those stability requirements, right? Going from standing doesn't work there to tall kneeling, half kneeling, to laying down, to sideline, and doing a similar motion with, it might not be look like a full squat, right? But they're working their hips somehow because the squat works the hips. The situation where you would add load is if most of the time is with someone with a brain injury or a neurological condition where they need some kind of counter force to help them stay upright and can really help them, give them a cue to sit back maybe with the squat. So like oftentimes with a squat with someone with a traumatic brain injury, I'll have them hold a weight up in front and move back, and it actually helps them like engage. It's more of an intrinsic cue. Well, yeah, it's an intrinsic cue. So they're actually holding on to something, right? Closed chain, moving their hips back, versus when they take the weight away, because their nervous system globally has instability from the brain injury, they have a harder time doing the movement. So it's more painful or uncomfortable. But adding that like tactile input can really help stabilize the nervous system. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love the phrasing of it. Makes you put it in a great picture because, yeah, no, we could keep talking about this all day out, and rewatching the first discussion was fantastic, and then everything going through today, it's a great correlation because I think a lot of people would come to. It's difficult even how we present a discussion like this because it's so powerful with mind and body and resiliency, but then you so subtly get into it's, a training discussion, and it does slide so quickly into the physical that it's a great way just to handle it and to deal with the stress of everything that we're going on as we started off with the discussion.
Well, yeah, so just to let you all know who are on, and then so this is really important, like the love principles, like the healthy body, healthy mind is high, like think of it as like the high level of what you can be thinking about on a daily basis. How am I leading myself first? How am I getting oxygen advantage? Am I taking some time to do breath work? When I'm working out, am I conscious of my breathing? How can I be more vulnerable in my life? Right? This pandemic most likely has brought up a lot of stuff for you. I'm speaking for myself because it's brought up a lot of stuff for me to face and be uncomfortable with in a good way. Hard, but good way. And then the fourth is, I'm doing that. The fourth is the elasticity. And so you understand change is possible. And when change is possible, when you start to like be more vulnerable in your life and you start to breathe a little bit deeper and you start to put yourself first a little bit each day, like what can you look forward to? It's not selfish, like you start to change, and that's the elasticity principle. And so today, because the population that we work with so much is wounded warrior population, veteran people who are wanting to be active, people who may use physical fitness, movement as a coping mechanism, being able to do it right for longevity is really important, and to create that elasticity in their body to like change your movement pattern. It's got to happen in your brain and it's got to happen in your body. So you can't just like, I'm just going to go work out. Like now you have to be more thoughtful with your workouts, more thoughtful with how you pick up your kids, more thoughtful with how you sit and stand. And tomorrow we're going to actually go into an actual grounding meditation and deeper into recovery techniques that right now, especially being confined, create that physical touch that we need, right? From like, we don't get a lot of touch now. And this is a way to get that in a way that's actually fairly therapeutic and can really help your tissues improve range of motion and stability. So tomorrow will be exciting as well, and more on the mind side.
Well, I think we're all definitely looking forward to it. And I know I got a couple of messages from Nelson and Darryl about having to drop off. But we are going to get this discussion posted. And I know and they are going to follow up. And then we know we've got a lot of people that this information is helping out a lot. So thank you very much for your time. We can hang out or have Kelly, you just popped back from mute. Do you have any comments or questions?
No, I just want to say thank you very much.
Of course.
Well, actually, can I actually ask you one thing? And I'm sorry if you covered it and I missed it. But as far as the carbon dioxide in our body, what does it physiologically do for us to be able to discharge the carbon dioxide or to?
Well, okay, that's a good question. So we're discharging it anyway when we breathe out. However, when you think about like being underwater or fitnessing, when you're working out, your body is taking in oxygen and expelling CO2 at a higher rate. And so when you can actually slow down your breathing, even when you're training and working hard, means that you're tolerating more CO2 in your body. And means that you're more tapping into that So it kind of comes down to the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So we want, when you wonder why people can work out for hours, or like, how can those people do those death runs or whatever they're doing, like longer runs? How can people go on a 100-mile bike ride, right? Well, not every Olympic athlete actually works their body as efficient. That's why this is a great test. Like, not every couch potato is efficient, clearly. So everyone needs this test, but it's like it tests how good you are at tolerating CO2 in your body, because if you can tolerate it, that means that you can actually control your breathing better when you're training hard. And that means that your nervous system won't be as taxed. So you can actually go.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And then, so hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow. So the way it'll go is there'll be a presentation that's recorded already, and then I'll be here to answer questions at 10. Is that right, LJ? I think.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. We'll log on at 09 and we'll kind of start the video and start the presentation, and then we'll kind of be around I'll be on, and anybody that pops on might have a chat dialogue going on as well. So
okay.
Thank you much for your time today.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope to see you all tomorrow. It's a deep dive, lots of recovery techniques, and the grounding meditation I think you all will really appreciate. So see you tomorrow.
Great. Thank you, Theresa.
All right. Bye, everyone.